logistics and frequently asked questions. Today's presentation will be recorded and it will be uploaded on our YouTube channel, CDKN Network, and I will send you the link of this recording in the following up email. Please close extra windows for your computers because it can add to the difficulties in listening to the session. Questions are very welcome, so please write them in the questions section that you can find in the toolbar on your GoToWebinar screen. We will try to answer them as possible in the time available. So the questions will be answered at the end of the session, so it will be great that you write them as the presentation goes on. So I want to also tell us about today's agenda and then introduce the participants. So the next one, please. So in today's webinar, we will try to answer the question, what lessons can be learned from 7 years of climate change resilience research in the Caribbean? I will provide a brief summary of the work that we have supported over the last years, and which is the basis of the Knowledge from Research project that we are presenting now. The second presenter today would be Olivia Palin from Acclimatize. She will tell us how the work about packaging this knowledge has been. And then we have the key findings, the cross-cutting issues and points of special interest about these knowledge packages that Will Bugler from Acclimatize also will introduce us. Finally, we have the comments from Dr. Trotz and Sharon Linden from the 5Cs, and we are very happy to have them here. And then at the end, the questions and answers from you will be answered and facilitated by me. So also, please follow us in our social media channels in Facebook and Twitter. And I would like finally to welcome our panelists. In the next slide. So Olivia is a senior consultant of Acclimatize. She leads Acclimatize's work for the Latin American and the Caribbean region on small island developing states, and is manager of Acclimatize's subsidiary company in Barbados. Olivia led Acclimatize's work developing the CDKN knowledge packages that are the focus of this webinar. Will is a senior consultant at Acclimatize and leads the company's work on communicating climate change risk and resilience. Will undertook the technical analysis of the CDKN project outputs and co-authored the newly released policy brief that will be discussed in the webinar. So thank them for the hard work. And on the following slide, I will introduce the different projects that these knowledge packages are the base of. So here are the 4 main projects and tools that CDKN has supported over the years. The first one is the Caribbean Online Risk Management Tool. And before I launch into the tool itself, I just want to have a brief reflection of the risk management ethic in the Caribbean, how it was great to work developing this tool. Because decision-making that is based on subjective value judgments without using the information and the expert advice and guidance that is available will compromise resilience. We believe that risk management assists in the selection of optimal cost-effective strategies for reducing vulnerability using a systematic and transparent process. Policies or initiatives that aim to reduce this vulnerability can be designated to complement and support the goals of poverty reduction, sustainable development, disaster preparedness, and environmental protection. So with that statement, I would like to introduce the Sea Coral, that is the Caribbean Online Risk Management Tool that provides an online support system and screening tool for climate resilient decision making. So how it works. Sea Coral guides government and businesses through key vulnerabilities that they could face when investing in projects and programs in a changing climate. For example, this tool helps answer the questions such, how could the sea level rise or freshwater scarcity affect the bridge I'm building? Sorry, or the health program I want to start. So Sea Coral is intended to be an active, dynamic decision support system that guides users through several steps. It helps them to identify whether their project is likely to be impacted by climate change, understand the risks, and take action to increase climate resilience. This is an online tool that provides countries with a user-friendly tool for non-climate experts, and this is very important because it's for planning purposes, and ministries of finance, planning, and others that can climate screen their key development programs. So then CDKN has funded the Caribbean Weather Impact Group, or the CARIWI project, that provided locally relevant climate data and information to help decision makers evaluate climate change and its impacts across a range of timescales. It generated a data and information portal with climate information at the scale that is relevant to policymakers across the Caribbean. And this web portal provides information and data sets concerning, for instance, the observed climate of the present day, regional climate model projections of the future climate, future scenarios of weather downscale from the regional climate model projections, and scenarios of weather derivated from hypothetical tropical cyclone events. So this has proven to be very useful, and the portal also provides 3 data simulation tools. One that is called a weather generator that provides synthetic scenarios of daily weather, such as temperature and rainfall, for supported meteorological stations across the region. Then also it provides a tropical storm model that is a model based on past memorable and notable storms across the region, and the output can be viewed as graphs and downloaded from the simulation page. And thirdly, a threshold detector, and this tool can be downloaded to run to investigate particular weather events. So this project has been important in providing this climate data that is relevant to the region, and can be a good planning tool as well. So I would like to introduce the third one, is the Global Island Vulnerability Research, Adaptation, Policy and Development, Give Rapid project. This research project focused on community adaptation to climate change in St. Lucia and Jamaica. And the aim of the GiveRap was to understand the multi-scale socioeconomic, governance, and environmental conditions that shape vulnerability and capacity to adapt to climate change within and between small and medium-sized coastal communities. What is interesting about GiveRap is that it provided a comparative study of small coastal communities that are facing similar challenges and contexts. It has a wide applicability to small island developing states, adaptive capacity, and vulnerability. The GiveRapid produced 24 project outputs, and they were organized according to the project's 4 main themes: climate science, community-based vulnerability assessment, governance, and macro insurance. And finally, the Caribbean Research Call. This research call was issued by CDKN, inviting researchers to submit proposals that would address some of the most pressing research gaps in the region that were identified in the implementation plan. 5 research projects in Belize, Jamaica, St. Lucia, and Trinidad and Tobago were selected that produced 23 project outputs across the 5 separate research projects. So these projects were about participatory research to enhance climate change policy and institutions in the Caribbean. We developed the area tool pilot. The second one was assessing the potential impact of climate change on Belize's water resources. The third was climate change and inland flooding in Jamaica. The fourth one was identifying opportunities for climate-compatible tourism development in Belize. And the last one was climate impact and resilience in Caribbean agriculture. And this one focused on Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica. So as you can see from these 4 projects and tools, a lot of outputs have been generated. And when we were doing our assessment, we noted that there were more like nearly 70 outputs, like from policy briefs, journal articles, etc., that provided very interesting results, but it was very difficult to grasp the main ideas and findings. So from because of that need, we developed this project, Knowledge from Research in the Caribbean, where Acclimatize helped us on packaging this information and knowledge produced. So, sorry if I was very long, but we thought it was important to give you some of the background of where we started. And from this, I want to give the floor to Olivia, that will tell us a little bit more about this experience.
Hi there, I've just put my webcam on in the corner. So thank you, Maria Jose, and good morning, colleagues in the Caribbean and the Western Hemisphere, and good afternoon to those of you further east. So as Maria Jose has indicated, CDKN has supported a significant amount of research and tool development over the past 7 years in the Caribbean, and CDKN were very keen to distill the findings and share them through 4 knowledge packages. Next slide, please. So as per this slide, the overall goal of the piece of work that we've been doing was to facilitate awareness, understanding, and use of all of the 68 or 70 outputs that Maria Jose has just mentioned that come out of the CARIWIG, the Sea Coral, the GIVRAPT, and the Caribbean Research Core Project. So how did we address this? We gathered together all the 68 outputs. We found that we had 2 online tools, 21 academic peer-reviewed papers, 17 policy briefs, 17 technical reports, and we had 11 presentations, posters, and brochures. And these were pitched at different levels and for different audiences. And my colleague Will, who's will be speaking shortly, supported by Maria Jose, read through all the 68 outputs and captured the most important findings from each of them, as well as identifying the cross-cutting themes and lessons that were emerging out of the 68. Next slide, please. So we looked at the findings, and through much discussion, we thought about what was the best way of organizing the information. And eventually we decided with CDKN and with support from the 5 Cs that these 4 themes on this slide would be the most useful and effective way of organizing the data and defining the knowledge packages around. So the first one we have is climate risk to Caribbean prosperity, the case for action, a more high-level theme. The second, the role of national government. Third, climate data for the Caribbean. And fourthly, climate adaptation at the local level. And we felt that this organization of themes would be the most useful access point for the target audience. And the target audience is broad. The work that CDKN has supported is targeting decision makers and technical persons, as well as experienced climate change practitioners working in government, in the non-governmental sector, as well as in private companies. Next slide, please. So what is the knowledge package? For each knowledge package comprises 3 products. So a policy brief, which is a 12-page document, a short 3-minute video, and a 1-page infographic. And so therefore we have 12 products. So 4 packages and 3 products in each. And these are all intended to summarize the findings that derive from the source material according to the theme, and importantly, to point readers and users in the right direction where they can drill down to get deeper and more detailed information. And so, as you can see on the slide here, we've taken a screenshot from one of the policy briefs. Now, the policy briefs naturally are the most detailed of the products, and one of the advantages that they have is on the last 2 pages of each brief, we've included a table which summarizes all of the source material that it's based on. So I'm not expecting you to be able to read what's in this little screenshot here, but just suffice to say that it captures the subset of the 68 outputs, the name of the resource, the type of the resource, who it's targeted at, which country it pertains to, and a summary of each resource, as well as a link to where you can find more information. The videos and the infographics are higher level, and they are summarizing the findings in a more visual and dynamic way, which could be useful for communication purposes, we hope, in the region. Next slide, please. So, thank you. Really, before I hand over to Will, I just wanted to flag that all of the knowledge packages are available on CDKN's website. They've been launched over the past month, and hopefully those of you attending may have picked those up in your inbox. And then all of the source material, the 68 outputs on which the packages are based, they're all available on the 5Cs Clearinghouse, for which we've put the web link here on the screen, as well as CDKN's website. So that's really what we've been doing. I'll now hand over to my colleague Will Bugler, who will talk through the key findings and the messages coming out from each of those 4 knowledge packages. Thanks, Will.
Thanks, Liv. Thank you very much. I think I'm going to take control of the slides as well here, so bear with me a second while I just grab the slide. There we are. Can everyone see that okay? I hope so. It should be.
We're not yet in slideshow view.
Can you? Is that better?
No, I'm afraid that we can't see the screen.
Okay.
There you are.
Can you see? Is that okay now?
Yes, that's
okay,
right.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Will and Maria Jose for the introduction, and hello everyone. So I've been set the challenge now of introducing and summarising the knowledge packages covering 7 years of research in 20 minutes. So I'll try and move quickly through them, but hopefully this will give you a kind of flavour of what they contain. It's a really rich theme of research, so I'd really encourage you all to go and investigate the knowledge packages in detail. So as you can see from this slide, the first of the knowledge packages that I'd like to introduce is one that focuses on highlighting some of the climate risks of the Caribbean and showing why climate change is so important for the region. And so it would really be useful for those of you who have joined this webinar who work in sectors or policy areas perhaps that are affected by climate change, but who are not necessarily climate specialists themselves. However, the brief also draws on specific examples and case studies that demonstrate some of the kind of more detailed potential impacts of climate change to the Caribbean. And so we really hope that this will be useful for all of those working on climate change issues in the region as well. So hopefully the detail is there as well. And the emphasis of this brief was not to go into great detail about the how of climate resilience, but make the case for why. And it does that by highlighting the impacts of climate change on 2 key sectors, agriculture and tourism. And showing also that there are several options available that can be implemented to help adapt to those impacts. So what you're seeing now on your screen is the infographic that has been released to accompany this knowledge package. It highlights some of the main points from the knowledge package, and I'll use these infographics to talk a little bit around some of the findings of our analysis from the source material. So I think the first message here is that from the knowledge brief is that climate impacts of the Caribbean are costly, and we know that they have that single events can have large, significant impacts on individual countries, and those messages comes out very strongly in the source material. And many of you, I'm sure, will be familiar with these messages from some of the economic analysis studies that have been undertaken in the region already. But what we also found from the analysis of the source material was that there was a lot of specific case studies which drilled into a lot more detail around climate impacts to key sectors like tourism and agriculture. So, for example, the Carrawig climate projections and the Caridro drought tool were applied in the Eastern Caribbean region, and it showed that can expect longer and more serious drought events, which would have specific and serious implications for agriculture in Belize. And we saw that these tools projected, alongside crop models, projected that, for example, corn yields in Belize may fall by as much as 25% by mid-century, by the 2030s, I beg your pardon. And other impacts included, in St. Lucia, rainfall volumes were projected to fall and have a negative effect on rain-fed agriculture. So in the Font d'Or catchment in St. Lucia, the river flows were projected to decrease by around 10%, and by the 2040, and by up to 40% by the end of the century. And so, when combined with some of the other analysis from the research call and the GiveRoute project, which looked at some of the vulnerabilities that we see in the agricultural region, this really had a powerful message about the impacts on agriculture. Whereas because we see lots of small 1 acre farms, 1% of the agricultural land being rain-fed, and so these kind of reduction in rainfall really will have big impacts, and that comes out really strongly in the source material. Impacts. The knowledge package also includes information on the some methods to adapt, which includes methods like crop diversification. So, for example, sweet potato yields were found to be a potential, were found to increase under certain climate change projections in Jamaica. So there were specific examples as well in the source material about some of the options that could be used to adapt. One other important area that was covered in the source material was about co-benefits of adaptation. So we're talking about solutions there, and one of the solutions that was used or that came out in the GiveRoute source material was around microinsurance as a strategy to protect farmers from some of the climate impacts. And some of the co-benefits associated with that were that farmers who had to spend money in the wake of climate change impacts like storms and floods, which damaged their crops, 25% of those farmers interviewed and questioned reported that those savings that we used were actually intended for educational purposes for their families. And so we really see how these kind of micro-insurance schemes might have co-benefits to society and the wider Caribbean economies. The second knowledge package that we focused on actually looked at the role of national government in building and driving climate change action and resilience. And this knowledge package then will be important for obviously those working in government ministries that are particularly relevant to climate change, so environment ministries, but also in ministries of planning, local government, and in particular finance. Also to those working on developing climate adaptation policy and in advocacy, in for example, NGOs or CSOs. The knowledge package here covers three main areas, and firstly, it's integrating climate change into national policy, national level policy, assessing institutional capacity around climate change action, and also translating national policy into local level actions on climate change. So again, here is the infographic. It should be on your screens. And it shows really there were three main areas that this knowledge package focuses on. The first, as I mentioned, integrating climate change into national policy and planning. And many Caribbean governments have ambitious plans and strategies to tackle climate change. However, some of the source material suggested that the next step is then to ensure that these are properly integrated into national level decision-making processes. So the source material from the research call, for example, looked at national policies on climate change adaptation governing Belize's tourism industry in 2014, and it found that despite Belize having several framework documents on climate change at the national level, there was a lack of perhaps integrated climate change planning at the sectoral level, so that wasn't being integrated well into the tourism sector policies that were governing that particular sector, and that was holding back progress on climate change resilience in that industry, in that sector. And the knowledge package here provides details around the sea coral tool, around how that can be used to help integrate climate change considerations into policy and planning processes. The second area that was focused on is around assessing and building institutional capacity. And this focused on the ARIA toolkit, which was developed by the World Resource Institute. And the ARIA supports policymakers in analysing and recording state of institutional capacity and readiness to implement climate change adaptation policies. It helps governments to identify strengths and weaknesses of current institutional arrangements, identify gaps in policy and practice, and establish baseline for monitoring and gathering and synthesizing these resources. And the third area was translating national policy into local action. And so rightly, there's a considerable amount of attention paid to local approaches to resilience building. But the CDKN research repeatedly found that bodies and organisations, that national bodies rather, and organisations played a really important role in driving climate change action at the local level. For example, GiveRab source material highlights research undertaken in agriculture, fisheries and tourism industries in Jamaica and St. Lucia, and it found that state bodies were essential to overcoming barriers to adaptation by using participatory approaches to decision making. And they did this by actively engaging with other organisations at the local level, connecting them. And researchers noted that not only were government bodies amongst the most well-connected stakeholders, but they also have a really high influence over the implementation of adaptation actions. One example of that came out of White House, Jamaica, where the Division of Fisheries improved the local cooperation and connections between existing community members, local fishermen's groups and conservation groups, and the Division of Fisheries was also able to establish a connection between the existing network and the Sandals Foundation, which is the philanthropic arm of the Sandals Resort International, which gave rise to this Sandals White House Specials Fisheries Conservation Area, which added a lot of resources and extra layers of cooperation to that, to managing those fishing resources. The third policy brief, knowledge package that we produced focused on specifically on climate data for the Caribbean. So this has a bit of a different feel from the other ones in that it looks specifically at mainly on one project, the Carrawig source material, which hosted the regional climate data portal and also data visualization tools available all through that portal online. The knowledge package also, however, draws on elements of sea coral and the research call, and these elements emphasize how the detailed climate data, the downscale climate data can be applied in the region, and includes important guidance on how it can be applied by decision makers. So this knowledge package should really be of value to both the technical climate researchers and practitioners who want to learn more about the data available to inform their studies and analyses, and also to practitioners in government or NGOs who want to better understand the limitations of the data and how decisions can be made in the face of uncertainty around climate change projections. So here again then is the infographic for this knowledge package, and it's split into 4 main areas. All this is available through the CARIWIG website, www.cariwig.org, all the data here. So on the left-hand side, sections 1 and 2 of this infographic, these deal with the raw climate data, and that is, number 1 is historical climate data, which is observed weather station data, providing historical climate data from over 40 weather stations across the Caribbean. That includes the climate variables such as rainfall, sunshine duration, temperature, vapor pressure, wind speed, and many more across 30-year time slices, 1970 to 2000 and 1980 to 2011. It also includes, here number 2, future climate change projections that have been downscaled from 2 global climate change models to make them relevant to decision makers in the Caribbean. So these projections for rainfall, temperature, wind speed, and many other variables are provided at the 25-kilometre resolution, so they're applicable for use even at the island level. And then the next 3 areas here, section 3, there are 3 tools, data visualization tools, which are also provided as part of the CARIWIG project. The first is a weather generator providing details of daily weather at specific locations across the Caribbean region, and this provides change factors as compared to past weather. So they show a percentage increase or decrease against past weather impacts. It also has a threshold detector that can indicate how many times a specific threshold might be exceeded. So in Belize, the tool is used to assess how climate change might affect dengue fever, for example. And researchers found that the number of days where minimum temperatures exceeded 18 degrees is likely to increase using the threshold detector. And that suggests that conditions for dengue fever could become more favourable. Other tools include the tropical storm model, which provides simulations of tropical storms against user-defined storm tracks. So users can select a strength of storm, a speed of storm, and then the track of the storm in the Caribbean, and then it will provide data on wind speed, precipitation amounts, and associated data with that hypothetical storm. There's also a drought tool, the CARIDRO drought tool, which allows users to process climate data to assess both atmospheric and hydrological drought. So atmospheric drought, less water in the atmosphere, less water falling as rainfall, and hydrological drought, so reduced water in the soils, lakes and groundwater. The final area that is dealt with in this knowledge package is around dealing with uncertainty in the climate projections. And the source material really acknowledges that climate models are not able to predict future climate conditions precisely, as no climate model is. And downscaling climate projections to a higher resolution, as happened in the CARIWIG project, can be misinterpreted as providing more accurate data, whereas in fact it increases overall uncertainty but makes it more relevant to the local area. So the source material really emphasises that given these uncertainties, Caribbean decision makers need to focus on identifying and implementing adaptation actions that perform well over a wide range of conditions. And this really represents a shift in emphasis from identifying optimal actions to finding robust ones that can work well in many different climate futures. And Sea Coral is a really instructive tool there as well for showing how to do that. So the final knowledge package, as we're running out of time, I'll go through this quite quickly, But the final knowledge package draws together all of the research that looks at approaches to improve local adaptation, local level adaptation, and it emphasises that climate change adaptation is at its core a problem for local communities. So it's at the local level where climate impacts are most keenly felt and where the majority of adaptation actions actually take place. It has important information for all those working on ground level climate adaptation projects, as well as for national decision makers who want to better understand how to increase the impact and uptake of national level policy making. So for a final time, this is the infographic that accompanies the knowledge package, and it shows how through organisational tools and analyses, local communities can better work together to understand and manage climate risks. And this knowledge package includes information from source material that really spoke to 4 main areas. The first was network mapping, which emphasised the importance of networked approaches at the local level. That is bringing multiple stakeholders together to co-manage collectively climate adaptation challenges. And the knowledge package shows that some arrangements of local networks are better than others at cooperating to take action on climate change. It provides approaches to analysing local networks and information about how to foster qualities that can enhance local ability to respond to climate shocks, and provide specific tools through which to do that. So it provides information about some of the qualities that communities can look for, and examples of how those tools have been applied in the Caribbean. A second area that it looks at is around community-based vulnerability assessments. So this is community approaches to looking at community vulnerability, and this is a participatory approach again, identifying vulnerability of local communities, and it provides rich qualitative data about community vulnerability that matches well with more traditional data-driven vulnerability analyses. In the Soufriere region of St. Lucia, the CBVA approach was used to assess the vulnerability of agriculture, fisheries and tourism sectors, and using semi-structured interviews, researchers were able to uncover some of the underlying reasons that contribute to vulnerability for local communities. And they found that one of the problems that many small farmers were facing was around the cost of installing irrigation systems was far too expensive, and this had implications for national policies, including the St. Lucia's water management plan for drought conditions, which encouraged farmers to install drip irrigation systems and restrict their water use in times of drought. However, as these irrigation systems were not widely adopted in the Soufriere region for small farmers, this policy might perhaps be less effective than anticipated. Related to this area is the local adaptive capacity approach, which is again a community-driven approach to, and this time assessing adaptive capacity in particular. This again uses a participatory approach, providing qualitative information about the community's ability to respond and adapt to climate change challenges and shocks. And finally, the knowledge packages looks at how these local level actions link to the national level. So it emphasises the importance of linking local level action to the national level and regional level. And it shows here how the ARIA toolkit can be used to do that, which we mentioned before. So it was really saying that this is a two-way street, two-way conversation, where the national level, where the local level actors can inform national policy, as well as national level action can help drive local level action. So that's really it from me. It's a bit of a whirlwind tour of these knowledge packages, It really is a very rich theme, so I'd encourage you to take the time to download them and take a closer look. I'll now hand back over to Maria Jose to introduce Dr. Trotz and the next speakers.
Well, hello. Thank you, Will, for that very interesting presentation. I hope that you can see my screen now. We are jumping a little bit around. So I would very much want to thank you, Will and Olivia, for your hard work here. It's been a challenge for all of us to package this information in a meaningful way. And I would like to mention that some of the already available to download in the document section of the webinar in the control panel. So you can start reading them right now. And if not, I will guide you afterwards on how you can access the other knowledge packages. And I want to thank you, Dr. Ulrich Trotz and Sharon Lincoln, for being here as the key experts from the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center. Dr. Trotz is the Deputy Director and Science Advisor, and he has been working on climate change in the Caribbean since 1997. And Sharon is the Policy Advisor and has also wide experience in development and international affairs. And at the moment, she's working as a climate finance advisor. So I would like to welcome them and give you the possibility also to share their camera so we can all see them. And we want to especially ask them how these projects have been how useful have they been for the 5 Cs and for the Caribbean decision and policy making. So hello, Dr. Trotz and Sharon.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Unfortunately, we are having some problems with our camera. So you'll have to take it from me that I am speaking to you and not Sharon.
Okay, okay, great.
Well, in terms of Sea Coral and Caraway, we as the center, we have had a challenge of providing the scientific basis for decision making and climate change adaptation and mitigation in the region. And our big challenge basically is to avoid the subjectivity that pervades decision making in the region. For Caraway, goes directly to the heart of a problem that has plagued us since we started our work. That is the absence of site-specific climate data to feed into our analysis of vulnerability assessments or impact studies, and basically to come up with recommendations and adaptation options that decision makers can then use. Caraway had its genesis basically in our experience with a similar activity on the UK SIP, where they had used the weather generator to great effect. And we decided to pursue a partnership with the University of East Anglia and the University of Newcastle, basically to build to utilize their experience to help us to develop the Caraway tool in the Caribbean. One of the things that I think has made this such a success is that before the project actually got on the ground, there was extensive stakeholder consultations throughout the region with the different potential users from the different sectors. So at the end of the day, we now have something basically that has great utility value right across the region. The other thing is, I think one of the heartening outcomes was that we didn't only produce Caraway, but we got 2 other tools. The drought prediction tool that was developed by our partners in INSMET in Cuba, and the Storm Model Tool, which has the unfortunate acronym of SMASH. And that was developed by our colleagues at Mona. Now, we have basically done a full assessment of these tools, and we are about to use resources from another project that we are now implementing, the USAID project, to start to reach out to the different users, basically to help them to understand how they access the tools and how they utilize them in their work. The Sea Coral tool, we had flirted with developing a risk management tool for the Caribbean years ago. But if you look at that tool, it's steeped in a lot of subjective type of judgments that to bring you to a final decision. So we were never satisfied with it. And so we welcome the opportunity working to get this new Sea Coral, this new tool, the Sea Coral tool, which basically allows anyone, and including decision makers, sectoral experts, lay persons, to understand whether the activity that they're about to undertake is likely to be exposed to climate risk. So at one level, that alerts the user that they need to look at how they would integrate climate risk into whatever plan they are putting on paper. At the other end, there is a toolbox for sectoral experts, for the technicians. So once you start that trigger about a risk needs to be addressed, then there are tools in that box, whether you are in the agricultural sector, the water sector, the health sector, there are specific tools that were developed that would allow the technical expert to use those tools to identify, to quantify the risk, and to develop adaptation options, which basically can be placed before the decision maker. So a combination of, and now the CARIWIG tools are embedded in that toolbox for Sea Coral. We are very satisfied with the potential of these tools, and there is a great demand. We started with the Sea Coral outreach with decision makers, and now we have a great demand basically across the region, coming from professional groups of engineers, from the private sector, recently from development banks. So as I said, we are very pleased with the outcomes, and we certainly, they are now embedded in our work. Sharon?
Hi, thanks, Dr. Trotz. I'll just add briefly to what Dr. Trotz mentioned and speak to the uptake that we've been seeing in the region, particularly for Sea Coral. One of the early and most promising outputs was a decision taken by the government of Grenada, a policy decision really, that any future development initiatives in the country would utilize Sea Coral as a basis for the development of those projects. We've also had the unique experience of a regional financial institution utilizing Sea Coral for a country's project funding request. And what that showed us was that just a small incremental cost makes the investment climate resilient. And I think we're able to get the webcam up. There's Dr. Trotz.
Good morning.
At the very end. But that's all from my end. Maria?
Hello.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah.
Hello. Can you hear me? Great. Well, I think it's great to see that mainly you commented about Sea Coral at CARIWIG and the way that it's being used by different stakeholders in the region. I think that it was our initial goal to make sure that these tools can be used for participating, as you mentioned about Grenada, also by financial institutions. But I would like to know, I think, that which are the challenges that you see in coming ahead on how to use these tools for more mainstreaming climate change, vulnerability, and risk in the Caribbean. What are the challenges ahead?
The major challenges we see is basically resources to meet all the requests that we are having from different groups to be exposed to the different tools. And the other one is sort of developing end-to-end risk management solutions for the different sectors. We've managed to do that with the Global Water Partnership for water, where all of the tools that would be required to carry out vulnerability assessments, impact studies, identification of adaptation options and cost-benefit analysis of the different options are there for the water sector. We're hoping to do that for the other sectors, agriculture, health, coastal development, etc. But our biggest challenge, of course, would be resources and well, both financial and human resources. There's just so few of us basically in the region to move that ahead. But certainly, I think the Sea Coral tool has been an excellent entry point, not only for ministries of finance and planning, but now filtering down to all sorts of different groups. So I think those are our main challenges. Okay,
well, thank you. I think it's been great to see that they're being used, and there is a sustainability of tools in the future as well, and that the FICE has taken them as also their own tools for climate change in the Caribbean. So thank you for your contribution. And now I would like to invite the participants of this webinar to write the questions about the issues that were here, or if there is any other clarification that you will need, you can write that on the questions part or the chat as well, whatever is easier for you. It's great to know that I just want to tell you that we have more than 60 people participating in this webinar, so thank you all of you to be here. While we are waiting for people to ask their questions, I want to point to these wonderful resources that have been produced. So each of the knowledge packages that we'll mention on national governance, on awareness rising from agriculture and tourism sector, on climate data, and also on community governance and local adaptation here. I'm just showing you that a screenshot of our dedicated knowledge package page, where you can find all the policy brief for that knowledge package, a short 3-minute video that will guide the main messages that can be used in any settings in the Caribbean, and also there is a subtitled version in Spanish, and also the infographic that will already shared with us. So each of the knowledge package has three products, and at the end of the webinar, I will send you an email with the links to download and have a look at this more carefully. So we have a question here from Dale on the implications of climate change on agriculture and tourism. Has there been any study on food processing in the region? In other words, are the stages between farm and plate an issue in the region as regards climate impacts? So I think that Will that had a deep dive in all the research outputs whether you can remember if there was any particular on this.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch the question there. So, could you repeat that?
I will read it again. I think that, yeah, it's the implications of climate change on agriculture and tourism. Looking at that specific topic, is there has been any on the stages between farm and plate on food processing in the region?
Actually, that
or it was mainly about crops. I think that was.
So yes, that's right. I mean, actually, in the knowledge packages, in the outputs, in the projects that we looked at, most of the focus was on climate change impacts to agriculture at farm level. So that mainly came out of the Karawig research, which provided specific case studies around the implications of reduced rainfall, for example, for farmers at farm level. So I think there is considerable amount more research to be done still in the region about how those kind of impacts are going to affect the wider value chain, if you like, the wider supply chain. But yes, most of these were actually directed specifically on how drought incidents might affect crop types, crop growing abilities, soil moisture, and the impacts on the farmers themselves, and what adaptation actions they might be able to take.
Okay, well, thank you, Will. We have also a question here.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, 5C's Otis Jocelyn. I just wanted to also respond.
Hello, how are you? I'm as well.
I am okay. I just wanted to make 2 points. One is that in terms of agriculture and the set of farm and agro-processing and the tourism sector, the most inhibiting factor there will be the whole issue of energy costs in the region in terms of what it will cost to move from the farm to agro-processing and then to the hotel industry and so forth. So that will probably be one of our main areas. But also one of the things that we have to consider is the fact that at times the season or the hurricane season falls also within, or a part of it falls within that high tourism period. And also if we have serious impact on our agriculture farms during that season in terms of from storm damage or heavy rainfall, then we can have a shortfall of food for that tourism sector that will then come up basically starting towards the end of that hurricane season. So from that perspective, we probably can see where we need to probably start to pay some more attention in terms of maybe looking at alternatives such as greenhouses and so forth for vegetables and these sort of things.
Mm. Yeah, well, thank you for that. We have Marcia here that she said that Dr. Trotz indicated that there were some data gaps for input into the models. Going forward, are there any particular areas that we should be looking at, that we should be focusing on to collect data? Could you hear me there, or it was not very clear, the sound?
Is there another question?
So I will repeat again, just in case. Is there? Yes, here is the question. I will repeat that again. So Dr. Trotz indicated that there were some data gaps for input into the models. Going forward, are there any particular areas that we should be looking at or focusing to collect data?
Repeat, please. You broke up at the end there.
So Dr. Trost identified that there were some data gaps for input into the models. You can provide some information and what type of data is missing. So any particular area where they need to focus on collect data?
Yes, want to answer that?
In terms of data gaps, one of the areas we need to be focusing is that a lot of the smaller islands, in order to fit into, say, the baselines that we have, let's say we take the Carrick, for example, they wouldn't have daily consecutive or 30-year time slice of data. So that's one of the areas. Also, looking at application of the weather generator, we do not have wide coverage within islands in a number of cases. So we have, like, in, let's say, the smaller islands of the region, we have like 1 or 2 specific stations. But then if we want to really target agriculture and the yield with respect to agriculture and watershed management and stuff like that appropriately, we need to also have stations within these other areas, within these smaller islands, to capture that data that can feed in better into the model, give you a better, a more robust analysis that makes more sense for a lot of the sectors within the countries. So from that perspective, we have those things. And also, we still do not do a lot of properly documented environmental data that also is important in supporting the meteorological data and so forth that we will want to collect.
Just to say that with this in mind, we have projects that we are implementing. One is the USAID project, where we are going to install stations in the countries, and CIMH, our sister institution, is now carrying out a consultation with the different countries to see how best we could distribute and place these systems to support this type of gap and shortfall.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that answer. Yeah. We have also another question here about climate change education, particularly on primary and secondary education. And I believe that this question is more related how climate change has been included in all school curriculum at different levels in the Caribbean. So I think that
this is always a challenge. We have started the pilot with schools in Belize, but one of the issues is that our approach basically is that rather than putting more burden on the curriculum, we integrate climate change issues into different parts of the curriculum. That requires close collaboration with ministries of education and with CXC, the oversight exam organization in the region. Now that takes some time. But what we are encouraging basically is that in individual countries, you could start initiatives with schools. We're particularly keen on the agricultural sector and introducing a system of school gardening right across the region in schools, where what the students are exposed to are the new techniques like drip irrigation and greenhouse cultivation, aquaponics, etc. These new techniques that would inform the future farming. But certainly it is a challenge. I think agriculture is a very good entry point for this if we're looking at the school curriculum. But it's a challenge that we are aware of and certainly would want to address as we move ahead.
Yes, thank you. Yes. So we have another question here from Dennis, and it's more about monitoring systems and adaptation. And would like to know the lessons that were learned on this topic, on monitoring systems of adaptation. Is there anything that you can say about what you've learned from that?
It's
clear or need more clarification?
This question is an interesting question. It's something that, personally speaking, I'm concerned about. We have just on the threshold of implementing adaptation anywhere. It's not that we've been into adaptation activities for years. And yet, I see there's so much of focus and time spent on identifying indicators for adaptation success. And I think we're putting the cart before the horse here. What we could do basically is anticipate what we would like to see as a result of adaptation interventions and use that basically to inform the framework that we are going to put in place to monitor it. But to speak now about having monitoring systems in place for adaptation, I think is slightly premature, but that's a very personal opinion at this point in time.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for that. Any other comment on that, or should I move to the, we have the last question from Alvaro. He wondered what the university and science can do against the political decisions that are taken at a global level in the field of climate change. This is a very interesting question that from your point of view and from the 5C's perspective, how scientists and universities can help move forward climate change and some not very very encouraging decisions that are being taken at the moment.
That's a difficult question to answer, given the peripheral role that the university has in influencing decision making. Anyway, there's a very good example. What the universities have to do basically is to sort of dedicate themselves to churn out the facts, get the science right. And I'll give you an example about that. The IPCC is just about to, I think by 2018, I think it's 2018, they have to produce a special report on the consequences of a world that is warmer, that gets warmer than the 1.5 degrees threshold that we in small island developing states have been promoting. Now, our university in Mona, this climate studies group, they had financial support from the Caribbean Development Bank to carry out some research to make that sort of question specific to the Caribbean. In other words, what are the consequences of a world warmer than 1.5 degrees centigrade for the Caribbean? Now, this is done, and this is going to appear, the results are going to appear in a peer-reviewed paper. And this is important because the IPCC does not quote anything that isn't peer-reviewed. So in this small way, we are trying to influence decision-making at the global level by highlighting really what are the consequences of 1.5 warmer world for the Caribbean, and to couch that sensitivity in the discussions whenever they take place.
Okay,
Just one more.
Great, thank you. I agree with you. I think having the best available data and information.
Just one other thing to add to what Dr. Trott said.
Yes, please.
What Dr. Trott said also, currently the 5Cs is embarking on having a regional climate change conference. We're looking at September, where also this information that he spoke about will also be make public in that at that forum. This will be a 1-week conference that will be specific to the Caribbean region. And therefore, again, based on the type of persons that we are hoping to have at that event, because we are hoping to have some policy makers also attend these sessions, we are hoping that will help influence their thoughts and decision making, and therefore maybe have an impact at the national and also community level within countries.
Okay, yeah, that's very interesting. So we hope that we can also share the information and the work that is being done at, with these knowledge packages there as well. Unfortunately, our time is over. I just want to briefly direct the participants to some of the resources that we have from CDKN, our newsletter, and also webinars, recording to all past webinars, and the videos and the policy brief and the infographic of this knowledge package. All is available here in our website, cdkn.org. Well, we hope that you have enjoyed this webinar, and I will give the word now to Dr. Trotz and our colleagues in 5Cs, and to Will also in London.
And thank you very much. And we're looking forward to the CDKN team on Friday.
Thanks ever so much. It was a real pleasure.
Yes.
Olivia had to rush off to catch a flight, but she also sends her sincere thanks to all the participants and to 5Cs and CDKN. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and see you in the next webinar. Bye-bye.